Reviewing your gameplay, also known as reviewing your VODs, is a surefire way to improve. However, there are correct and incorrect ways to do so. Sure, it is always good to look back and see what you could have done better, but there are always times where it is simply unnecessary. These concepts simply aren't touched upon enough, but luckily, with my time and experience playing semi-professionally as well as within top 500, I can teach you how to VOD review effectively. VOD reviews are essential for improvement, but it is important to recognize the conditions to do them. Knowing when to VOD review is arguably more important than the review itself. If you are a veteran player, you can never VOD review enough. However, if you are a new player, chances are that VOD reviewing might not help you as much as it should. Newer players oftentimes don't know the game well enough to dive into a VOD review. Metal ranked players may also just need to play the game more, especially if you're putting less than 10 hours into a season at a time. So, when should the majority of players VOD review? Most of the time, it is when they are stuck in a rank, or they play a game, it flies by, and they have literally no idea what just happened, even if they win. Now, before I explain how I personally do my own VOD reviews, there is one core subject I must cover, and that is motivation. Many people know they should VOD review, but simply don't because they think it is boring. Are they wrong? Well, not exactly. Playing the game will always be more enjoyable than watching yourself play the game. But how much more fun would it be if you put in just an hour a week into watching your own tape? Now it becomes more than just a game, but a self-fulfilling improvement process. If this doesn't catch your attention, use it as more of a utility than a practical use. Did you just lose 2 games in a row because of a lever, thrower, or other unlucky coincidence? Use an hour to look over the games and prevent the tilt-inducing SR loss. I can't give you the magic pill that will make every single one of you fall in love with watching VODs, but I can give you suggestions that make it a little bit more bearable. Moving forward, let's talk about the VOD itself. First, I will give you common concepts to look over and then review an example snippet. Before you start your VOD review, you have to look at the composition you are playing and the composition the enemy is playing and see what each team is trying to do to win. For example, in this game, both teams are running similar compositions. Blue team wants to set up their Zenyatta, Shocker, and then dive within his LOS as well as the Widow's LOS to melt the opposing team with ease. The red team wants to do something similar, however, they want to accentuate the poke side of their composition before the dive because they have a Mercy, Ashe, and Sigma. What composition looks better on paper? The red team seems to have the upper hand, as the Widow doesn't make sense with the dive idea of the composition. However, that doesn't mean it is lost. It just means that maybe Sombra or Soldier are better options. We are going to focus on the blue team from Shocker's perspective. In the current matchup, Shocker can look for aggressive opportunities much more frequently compared to if it were a mirror matchup. If the enemy was on a hyper dive or rush composition, with variations primarily consisting of Moira, Lucio with a monkey and a diva, Shocker would have to play to hide essentially, while his team poked to either dive aggressively or peel for Shocker when the enemy dives him. Let's move on from the theory and get into the game. During the game, there are phases you want to keep in the back of your mind after every single fight that you must ask yourself. What do you think they will have? What are they going to use? And in turn, what are you going to use? This is a technique that is much better used while watching Overwatch League or Contenders. However, it is good to get into the habit of thinking about it during VODs as well as in game. In this situation, Shocker has Trans and his Tracer and Ball have their ultimates, while the enemy has Pulse and is closing on Sigma's ultimate. From Shocker's point of view, he can play extremely aggressively because he has Transcendence. While he does utilize Transcendence prematurely, it allows for his team to push on the Sigma before he can use his ultimate. While they were a bit slow to engage and they made many mistakes, the main idea can still be understood. Deaths are another event that must be looked at thoroughly. How could each death be prevented? Don't look at just your positioning, but your ability usage as well. In this situation, Shocker overextends to heal his Widow instead of being aggressive with his Brigitte. This could all be watered down to a few things. Remember when Brigitte used Rally last fight when they didn't need to? What if Shocker didn't use Trans when he didn't exactly need to either? What if instead of playing bottom, the team played the high ground that would complement their dives more? And what if the Widow went Sombra instead of Widow? Obviously, there are a lot of factors that go into this specific example, but for the sake of time, it is better we don't go over them all. Hopefully this translates the main idea of the basic procedure for a VOD review. Let's now look into a Baptiste map in a live setting. So let's start off by looking at our composition and what we have to win this fight. So on our composition, we typically want to play extremely fast and try to close the distance and force a brawl because we have a Reaper and a McCree with a Lucio and a D.Va. It's all just based upon very fast fights, and you can take it a little bit longer because you have the Kree as compared to a Mei, but that's just our basic composition structure and how we want to play. We have close to beat up, so there's a lot of options we can do with that, but now it's time to look at what they're playing. They're not playing something that would be traditional on King's Row. Rather, they have a ball sig composition that wants to kind of play to spam and look for picks before they actually take an engagement here. So when we actually look at what goes on here, we're going to see a mistake that Shocker makes here, and he doesn't account for, as it's not something you're usually thinking of when you're playing King's Row, but it's something that you really need to look out for just as you're learning the game in general. Now, the second thing I want to talk about that's not just compositions is what the enemy's alts are. They have a Valk, which it's something that you can account for, but nothing super game defining when you compare it to a Sigma, who's almost on his ult. He's at 86%, so you know that he's closing that if the main support is alt tracking correctly, or if you're just going to do that yourself, because if it's a ranked game. But nonetheless, you have to understand as BAP that, okay, my Lucio doesn't have beat yet, and until he does, I need to keep my immortality field for Sigma. So let's see how Shocker reacts to this and how he actually makes a mistake that almost costs him the entire game, but they end up coming out on top. Spoilers, but we won't be watching that. Anyways, let's get into this. He's just doing what he needs to do, looking for right clicks, left clicks here and there to do damage when he's not being forced of resources, but notice how he dies here, and we can then study the effects here. This is something you should always look for as Baptiste, is when you die or when a teammate dies. You don't have to look when every teammate dies, but make sure that if your Ryan dies as Bap, that you're looking for that. So he dies here, mostly because he jumped off of high ground and was not aware that the Junkrat was spamming from main. However, if he were pressing tab in this scenario, he would have been more aware of what was going on here. Now, I'm sure he's learned from his lesson, and if he ever plays a Junk again on King's Row, he'll be looking out for this. But then now from third person, let's see how this immediately switches the fight's momentum into Red's favor. Immediately, the Sigma has ultimate, but the Lucio does not yet, and at this point, the fight is lost for blue team due to a mistake from Shocker's point of view because he didn't have that immortality field. Alright, so let's take a look at another scenario. Now, we understand that the Junk is very close to Tyre, and the minefield is also going to be coming out from the red team. We also have to make sure that we're looking for duplicate, but in terms of being able to react, you have more time because Echo kind of screams out the character that she does take, and there are just more threats that we have to be looking for that are more immediate. Now, let's see how Shocker plays to mitigate the threat of these ultimates. A beat immediately comes out from the Lucio, so generally the team wants to stay stacked and kill the same target because they're in brawl. But something that Shocker has to be looking out for now is the Tyre from the Junkrat, which just got called out, and you can see right here. Let's see how he reacts to this. So he doesn't notice that his Rhine is there, and then he immortality fields late because he wasn't aware of the Rhine's positioning, which is honestly the most important character to make sure you're keeping account of on Brawl. Because of his late reaction time, he still does lamp, and we are going to see how this affects him and his team moving later into the fight, even though the fight is balanced right now. He gets minefielded, drops to the ground, the immortality field is destroyed, and then soon after, he is taken out. most of these things are just general awareness things you can see, but you can also see how much this can actually affect your games, even though it's just such a small mistake. So keep this in mind whenever you're trying to do VOD reviews in the future. To put it all together, make sure that you understand the composition you are on and how it interacts with the composition you are against. Don't just look at your deaths, but also crucial deaths of your teammates as well, just like our recent King's Row example. VOD reviews are important, but don't overdo yourself. Make sure you are still having fun with your improvement process, and you will get there in no time. And with that, the video comes to a close. Shout out to Shocker for lending me the codes we have reviewed today. He is an aspiring support player from the community that has achieved a 4,500 peak last season. I urge you to check him out and watch his Twitch channel linked below. Thanks again, Shocker. If you have any further questions, don't be afraid to reach out. If you have stayed with me so far, consider giving the video a like and subscribe, as it helps the channel out a ton. Thank you so much for watching, but until next time, I've got a peace out and Paz out. I'll see you in the next one.